I try to focus less and less on specific modules, and that served me well. There's always something new and fancy just being released, and in general I want to share the joy of making music rather than chasing gear. But every now and then there's a module stuck in the back of my mind. When something new comes out, it's tempting for people to focus on its party tricks and the things it's very good at. But that can leave me wondering if a piece of gear can be pushed into a different direction. For me, that was the case with the Gamechanger Audio Plasma Voice, released a while ago. It's mostly known for pretty harsh, shredding, techno, percussive, bassy and noisy stuff, and it does that very well. But I got interested in it for another reason, wondering if I could use it as a calmer melodic sound design tool. Full disclosure, I've been in touch with Gamechanger Audio and they sent me one to try and see for myself. And spoiler alert, the answer is yes. With a bit of care, the module is very capable of more gentle melodic duties, as well as playable, tonal, gritty and characterful sounds. I want to share though where that interest comes from, so you know what I'm aiming for with this module. I came to modular with a pretty traditional knowledge of synthesis learned from standalone synths. My first approach in modular was to take those classic ingredients like oscillators, filters and modulators, but just use more of them. That extra freedom in modulation and signal flow is something I like to use to add more character and personality to sounds than I could with standalone synths. Instead of always being stuck to classic static waves, I like to use noise to add subtle pitch modulation, complex random voltages to add grit, spikes and texture to filter modulation, and so on. And that's exactly what brought me to the Plasma Voice. What if instead of all those different modules and patching tricks, I can tame the rawness of the Plasma Voice to add that texture, character and grit to a melodic voice that is still very controllable. So this video is not an overview or review of the Plasma Voice, instead I share what I learned from my exercises over the last months and how I use the module as a deep, characterful oscillator. As the name suggests, the Plasma Voice is an entire synth voice, but that concept is also limiting. It's been out for a while and I won't go over all the functions and features in depth. But in a nutshell, there are 7 banks with 7 different algorithms each called sounds. You can select these here. With the sliders, you can control aspects of the selected sound like pitch, mod, harmonics and flux. And then there's a built-in analog filter and built-in envelope modulation. You can tweak the envelope with a time control here. There are CV inputs for all sliders, additional drive and core EQ controls here. All sliders have shift functions for things like fine-tune and filter resonance. And there are a few additional inputs here, including a multi-CV input that can be assigned to any of the sliders. Using the internal filter and envelope modulation, the voice can be used with just a pitch and trigger or gate input to easily create punchy, percussive, bass and lead sounds. The module has multiple modes, which determine how the internal envelope responds to gate or triggers. The mode I'm using in the rest of this video is the oscillator mode. In this mode, the module always makes sound just like a normal oscillator. And the time slider and CV input here become a VCA or volume control. So now the Plasma Voice can be used as an oscillator, filter and VCA combo. Either a slow sequence with gate or keyboard can be used to control the pitch and gate an external envelope to modulate the filter and VCA in the Plasma Voice. Just adding a full ADSR envelope already opens up this voice for more controlled melodic purposes. What's important to understand about the sounds you select here is that they select the algorithm, but also what the modulatable parameters and even the internal envelope modulation do exactly. And that's different for each of the sounds. Going through all the raw sounds and variations wouldn't be fun, but for each of them it's worth to explore and push the different parameters to really understand what they're capable of. The mod, harm and flux sliders work in 2 directions and the effect is different on each sound. My favorite way to bring some of this character out in a simple melodic setup is by using the mod wheel to control the filter via the multi-CV input, and send a copy of the mod wheel to control the mod amount. On top of that, it's very easy to have 1 or 2 LFOs modulate the harmonics and flux CV inputs. Let's add some reverb to that. Here, the voice is sequenced again, leaving some space to tweak parameters by hand. This is powerful in a small setup, but adding a few more tools gives you even more control over the sound and development. Like most good oscillators, the module really comes to life in a slightly bigger ecosystem. Thinking of the module as a classic oscillator with a lot of wave shaping options, you can apply a lot of classic tricks in the book to add movement and depth to the sound. Here, the Plasma Voice is used as oscillator, sent through an external filter for added control. A keyboard is tuning the voice and gating an envelope opening the filter. The mod wheel is used to modulate the filter as well. A simple classic trick to add more time-based movement is using more envelopes. Here, a delayed attack hold decay envelope is used to modulate the flux on longer sustained notes. Here's the same idea but sequenced, and the second envelope used is a very short plucky envelope modulating the harmonics. A plucky envelope like this can be used to shape the transient of the sound, adding extra character. A simple LFO is used to modulate the flux for light waving modulation. Remember, the sliders have different effects going up and down, so the same is true for modulation from the center position. Can't stretch enough how important it is to explore different algorithms. Here's the same patch with added smooth random voltage to modulate the external filter. This helps to bring out the transient modulation done with the plucky envelope. In this case, a sound from the metal bank is used, which can lead to a nice mix of percussive and tonal sounds. Of course, you don't need to use sounds for what they're labeled as. You can make envelopes as complex as you like. I made a video about mixing and combining envelopes if you'd like to learn more about that. Here, both a delayed rising envelope modulating the flux and a plucky envelope modulating the harmonics are used. This adds control over the transient and changes in sustained notes. An LFO modulating the mod input is added as well. The mod slider often controls the depth of a built-in pitch modulation effect. Up and down have a slightly different effect, but there's a lot of value in using the multi-CV input as a second pitch modulation input beside the 1 volt per octave, so you can customize that in depth. Here's the Plasma Voice as oscillator with external filter and keyboard. A second transient envelope is used to modulate the harmonics and an LFO to modulate the flux. The mod wheel is opening the filter, and to add interesting FM drift, another LFO is modulating the pitch through a VCA using the multi-CV input. A copy of the mod wheel is used to modulate the frequency of the LFO as well as the VCA controlling the depth of modulation. Here's a sequenced variation. This time the plucky transient envelope is sent through a VCA to modulate the pitch via the multi-CV input. An LFO is used to modulate the depth. Another LFO is added modulating the harmonics for added movement. Another thing I found worth exploring with the module is audio rate modulation. Here's the Plasma Voice with extended filter, sequencer and envelope. In this setup, a regular tuned sine wave oscillator is added, also receiving the main sequence. That signal is sent through a VCA and used to modulate the flux rather than the classic choice of pitch. Different sounds respond in different ways to modulation. A copy of the envelope is triggering a plucky envelope opening the VCA, adding an FM-like transient to the sound. A regular LFO is modulating the harmonics, and the smooth random voltage is added modulating the filter of the Plasma Voice, even though an external filter is used. This just adds extra modulation options. Here's a similar setup again, but this time a keyboard is used to control it. Another interesting trick to add a unique character to a sound is a key off effect. To create this, a copy of the keyboard's gate is sent to a logic inverter, creating a high gate when a key is released. That signal is triggering another plucky envelope, in this patch used to modulate both the filter and pitch via the multi-CV input. This adds a light zappy percussive pluck to the sound every time you lift the key. This is a great effect when used with a delay. Here I cranked that up to Frippertronics level, which I explained here if you'd like to learn more about that. An advantage of adding an external filter to the setup is that you can explore different filter modes on the Plasma Voice to control the frequency of the sound. The drive and EQ are very nice additions but can be modulated. By setting the internal filter of the Plasma Voice to a high pass and using an external filter in low pass, you can create interesting high and low frequency modulation. Here both filters are modulated with unsynced LFOs to bring that out in a simple way. Another LFO modulating the harmonics is added as well. Here's the same setup without the LFO modulating the filter of the Plasma Voice. Instead, a second tuned oscillator is brought back, used to modulate the filter through VCA. The modulation depth is controlled with another LFO. In this patch, the plasma filter is used in low pass mode again. The three unsynced LFOs create a nice evolving sound. The Plasma Voice also has an accent input with its own envelope. I find it works best with more aggressive punchy sounds, so I don't dive deep in this video. But it can easily function like a ducking sidechain, which is very nice. Here's the keyboard controlled voice used before. A copy of the mod wheel is used to modulate the mod parameter. Two LFOs are used to modulate the harmonics and flux. A trigger sequencer is firing off a kick, as well as the accent input of the Plasma Voice. The voice can use shift slider functions to set the depth and release of the ducking effect. The Plasma Voice definitely puts a character stamp on every sound that comes out of it. But I really like the amount of noise and grit that comes from it naturally, and I find those pretty controllable with many of the sounds. Of course, if you want a triple oscillator ladder filter voice, this isn't it. But it's often having access to different sounding voices with different characters that can make up interesting compositions. I'm very interested to using this a lot more. If you'd like to learn more, have a look here, and as always, smash that like, subscribe and bell button if you want to see more modular content from me. But that's it for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.